Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 135, and we're going to be interviewing Ron S. How are you doing today, Ron?
I'm doing wonderful. It's actually my belly button birthday today. So
belly button birthday.
Yeah.
I've never heard that term before.
Well, we have recovery birthday or AA birthday, NA birthday, and then we have the belly button birthday. So
Look at that.
The day I was brought into the world. So I'm excited about it.
And I get to learn something new every day. So there you go. That's my new fact for the day. So let's get started. Let's go where I always start with everyone else. And tell me about your childhood and growing up. What was that like?
Well, so I was one of 7 children.
Big family.
Yeah, big family, big Polish Catholic family. Brought up, born in Belleville, Michigan, which is kind of down in the suburb of kind of the Detroit area, on 20 acres. And, mom stayed at home. Dad was a bricklayer, contractor, worked hard and drank hard. So my dad was an alcoholic, but my childhood, I don't remember him drinking that much. But it was a good childhood. I remember doing lots of sports and lots of fun stuff. And it was good. I grew up in the 70s kind of, I remembered, and it was good. I don't remember a whole lot of bad stuff about growing up until I probably got into my teenage years as things started to kind of progress. But as time went on, I got along with pretty well most of my brothers and sisters. And then 1978, we moved up to the west side of the state. But before that, I remember when things kind of changed. I remember in like 1977, we were on a job site with my dad and my other brothers. And I think my dad tried to stop drinking. He went into DTs. And I remember as a kid, just watching him seize up. And it was just so shocking as a young guy, because there's certain times in your life that things have changed. And I remember just being worried about my dad. I was 11 years old, and I remember just being so shocked. And the ambulance came, and like a few days after that, I remember him like hallucinating and telling us he was seeing stuff. And I just remember as a kid, that was a time that things had changed. Alcoholism kind of was something that I knew something wasn't right in the family, and that was like about when I was about 11. So then we moved up. This was back in 78. My dad was a bricklayer, contractor.
So real quick, going back, what happened during that episode when your dad was done with the DTs? What happened? Was there like a family talk about this, or what happened?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So there wasn't really a talk about it that we had. I mean, he didn't go into treatment or anything like that. I was being 11. There really was. My mom didn't go to Al-Anon yet at that time, and we figured he was going to try to stop. But I think he, if I remember correctly, he stopped for a while. But I think he started drinking off and on again. And so no, there really wasn't any mention of it. But I just remember that was kind of a turning point. Or as a kid, I started to worry more about my dad and this drinking.
It must have been scary at the time.
Yeah, it was. It was a really scary time in that time. So in 78, many people were old enough to remember the times were kind of tough economically. Interest rates were high, so people weren't really building. Jobs are tough. So my dad decided to get out of the masonry contracting building, and he decided to move up to Whitehall, Michigan, which for Michigan people, this is where we lived here. And we went up to this side, or I don't know how you guys can see it. And we decided to buy a gas station, liquor store, trailer park, because that makes a lot of sense for him at the time. But it was ways that things would come in. So we bought that, and that's when my dad's drinking really got out of control. I remember him going to DTs a lot of times. And about 4 of us moved up there. Some of us stayed back because my brothers and sisters were older. My oldest sister got married. My other sister was married, and an older brother was already gone. So 4 of us moved up into this store, gas station, liquor store, trailer park, and things started to dysfunctional family got really bad. My mom had left a couple times and came back and drinking in the liquor store, and I started becoming a teenager and just feeling like everyone kind of knew my dad was a drinker, and just kind of started feeling less. And it was tough moving to a new place when you're 12, 13. It's tough enough as it is, but things were kind of tough.
Did that make you feel when you knew that people around you knew that your dad was drinking?
Well, you didn't have people over. We had to stay at the store. It made me feel there was a lot of shame, as you know, a lot of shame, family dynamics. It felt different. Other people felt like there was that family secret. There was a family secret, but you kind of felt people kind of knew that your family wasn't the same. My brother, who was a little bit 2 years older than me, I mean, he rebelled a lot worse. And then I was I want to say I was a forgotten child, but if anyone who's done anything with treatment or figure out how that is, there's certain children take certain roles, and I just wanted to do stuff that didn't cause my mom any more hassle. So it was difficult. So in 1980, things were so tough, and then so luckily we had a kind of a convenience store chain bought out the liquor store, grocery store. It was a small store part, and we kept the trailer park. But still things were kind of tough, multiple dry out periods. My dad went into treatment. I think he went to a few meetings, and so, but he'd always have periods of dryness where he'd go 4 to 6 or 8 months of being dry, but then there'd be that thing where you'd find bottles here and there, and then you had that realization he was drinking again. Just the sadness and disappointment and the constant fear that he was going to die. It was just really tough as a kid growing up, and just the embarrassment of it. And just as a teenager, it was really tough, just feeling different, compared to everyone else. And I think I could tell that was kind of that start when I became a teenager, just my own disease. And I think about how I felt different, and started to feel less than. At that time point also, and my other brothers that were 2 years younger, I had a brother that went away to pharmacy school that was really smart. Everyone always looked up to him. He was a good looking guy, had a kind of a cool sports car. People always looked up to him as being really smart. Then the brother that was 2 years older than me was a really good football player. Was recruited by Michigan and Michigan State, Pittsburgh, and everyone always saw him as the, sports dude. And so naturally, as a teenager, you compare yourself to them. So I just kind of felt a little bit, I started feeling I could always felt less than, other people. And it's just normal stuff with teenagers, but I think that I could just have that complex of feeling less than. So then I turned 15 and I got exposed. To my first drug, and that was like the same time I got exposed to my first drink too, but my first drug. So growing up Catholic, many of you people who are Catholic on here, and this is no knock on being Catholic, because I'm still practicing today, but your mom always, you always had to go to church, and a lot of people with any religion, but you always hope that, she'd always forget that there was church time, but she never did, and always got us up and we always went. And church as a teenager is pretty boring. And I remember I had this really bad cough and cold, and I got, prescribed some cough medicine with codeine in it, called Actifed C, and I took it as prescribed before church one time, and I remember as plain as day, as church was never so exciting. I was listening to the priest talk and singing along, and all those feelings of insecurity and less than, and inferiority all kind of went away, and everything that was boring kind of away. And in my mind, I knew whatever was in this, you know, in this cough medicine that had a little sticker with a drowsy eye on it. I wanted to get whatever was in that. And then later that year, I also got exposed to alcohol at a party. At another friend who's not with us anymore. He had the same disease that I have, and his dad was an alcoholic, also a very abusive alcoholic. But anyways, we had a party at his house and got exposed to some, I think, gin or no, it was slow gin and 7-Up and a similar feeling as the codeine cough medicine, but I didn't like how it kind of made us so uncoordinated. But anyway, so 15 was that time frame where I knew it was whatever I was feeling emotionally, whatever chemically, something on the outside can change my mood, and all those feelings of inferiority left. So then from that time on, even with all that stuff that was going on, my dad was still drinking off and on. I found myself starting to kind of seek out things like that. Drinking was part of it. I didn't drink too much because you didn't want to get in trouble with sports. I was a pretty good sports star. I found rock and roll. I started playing music in a band. So I was playing music in a band. I wasn't as good as my brother John, but I was still pretty good as a baseball player and a football player, and I did really well with that. And so I didn't want to drink too much because I didn't want to get trouble with sports. But I started seeking out people's medicine cabinets. Anything that had a little eye on it, a little drowsy eye, I found myself looking for. So I started looking at people's cabinets and kind of taking people's pills and stuff like that. I had a girlfriend whose dad had a bad back situation, and I was taking some of his narcotic pain pills, and this kind of went on through high school with some partying, but looking for things to get out of myself. So 18, I was getting ready to graduate. What am I going to do? My dad said, well, maybe you ought to consider, and for first I thought I wanted to be an accountant because I was really good with numbers. I graduated like a 3.1. I was able to use, I was blessed with some pretty good at school. And I wanted to be an accountant, so I took an accountant class, but man, that was kind of boring. And then my dad's like, well, why don't you go into pharmacy like your brother? And he brought home these big, heavy books like this one right here. And I'm like, no, that seemed like an awful lot of studying, and they were really heavy. And then I took a chemistry and biology class. I really liked chemistry. And I thought, then I had a friend of mine who was a neighbor. One of my best friends was going to pharmacy. And I thought, well, I don't know if it was a conscious decision or a subconscious decision, but I thought, well, if he's going to go into it, I'm going to go into it too. So I decided to go into pharmacy. And so I went into pharmacy. I played some college baseball as I was going to pharmacy, and that helped with some of those feelings of inferiority. Was able to do that. So I went into pharmacy school. I got accepted to pharmacy school, went up to my undergraduate pharmacy. And then I got a job in the hospital as I was in pharmacy school. And then when you learn in pharmacy that, there are certain drugs that are controlled, they have a C on them, on the bottles. And C5 is the least abused drugs, and C2s are the drugs that are the most abused drugs. And I found, like, my second day working as an intern in the pharmacy in the hospital, found myself looking at those particular drugs. And I knew those were controlled drugs. And about the third day of me working in the hospital, I found myself starting to divert those drugs from the hospital, because once I used them, remember, I knew what was kind of made me feel different. Any of those things I didn't use every day, but I used every so often, because work was kind of boring. I kind of had an extra vertebrae in my back, so I would use that as an excuse because standing up. I partied some. I joined a fraternity that was pharmacy fraternity, and we partied some, but couldn't party all the time because pharmacy school is very hard to kind of get through. and I had a serious girlfriend, and she didn't know I was using off and on, but all this through time, my dad was still drinking off and on, and I worried a lot about my parents. My parents were older, but I always had that fear of my parents, passing away. It was always that fear of my sickness of my dad and all those type of things. So as time went on, when I worked in the hospital every other weekend, and I would just take from the hospital and use when I worked, but I never took any, the first couple of years, I never took any drugs back with me to the pharmacy school, because, if you did that, then you were bad. I was more recreational, I told myself. So, and I didn't drink every night, and my disease had not progressed yet. I partied some. So fast forward to my last year in pharmacy school, I found myself telling myself that, I can't see myself being 50 years old, working as a pharmacist, taking drugs and using drugs. You can't see yourself doing that. So I decided to stop cold turkey on my own. And I was able to do that for about 6 or 8 weeks in the spring before I graduated. And I found my drinking started to increase. I started, I was drinking more, partying pretty hard in the spring. I changed addictions. I mean, I must have been drinking probably 4 or 5 nights a week. As we know about this disease, is it basically just changes. And then then this big occurrence happened that the bottom fell out. So the spring of 1989, I had a little brother in the fraternity. We had brothers and stuff. This guy kind of partied hard with us. His parents owned this chain of pharmacies in Chelsea, Michigan. He was telling his parents he was going to get into pharmacy school as a pre-pharm, and come to find out he was failing out, and he was so full of shame and guilt. I believe that his brother's actually is in the program now, but before I believe he probably had this disease, and he was so full of shame and guilt that I was at the hospital, but he ended up hanging himself in the fraternity house, because he couldn't deal with telling his parents that he wasn't getting into pharmacy school. And I have heard about, they called me at the hospital, and I found out that, and just the emotional dealing with that was just so much that I just started picking up using again. And then it started all back over again. And then that was the time where I started basically using, every day. It wasn't just on the weekends or whatever. Just
So that what happened was hard on you, it sounds like.
Yeah, so it was tough. I didn't find him, but it was just really tough going to the funeral. He was a close friend of mine. Just classic part of if you think about recovery is there was no support system. I never, I didn't tell anyone that I had a drug problem. I didn't, many times I was going to tell my girlfriend I had a drug problem, but just the shame and guilt of what would people think. I felt like I was the only person in the world. So I graduated pharmacy school. There was no job for me at the hospital, so I got a job at one of the retail pharmacies. And again, thinking, God, I can't be doing this, but this is like, now we're talking January, or this is July 1989. And then I had to, when you're a graduate pharmacist, a lot of times they'll have you work at different places till they find the store. So I would go to these stores and I would divert, and at this time I started having some trouble with my relationship with my girlfriend. So it really compounded, the emotional pain. I had no ability to deal with any emotional pain, or I had no skills to deal with any of that type of stuff. And that's when I started using the Schedule II narcotics, stuff like the Percodan and the Percocets, and drugs that were a little bit harder, or orally. And it came to the time where really at that time I only basically felt good about for about 20 minutes in the morning, and the rest of it was just chasing the dragon. I did drink some during that time, but I was always afraid of mixing it too much. So I work at all these different hospitals, or I mean, at these different pharmacies, again, thinking, I'm going to quit tomorrow, but I never could quit. Then I thought, man, I gotta leave this store or leave this company and try to get back in the hospital because they're going to eventually going to find out. And I remember about 2 weeks. This is probably will be about December, right around Christmas time. I remember sitting. So I was taking things to get up in the morning. I was taking amphetamines and narcotics to get up in the morning, and then taking sleepers at night. And, again, I was 23 years old. And I remember laying in bed, just feeling horrible. And I remember just crying out to God, please help. I'm dying here. I need some type of help. I'm just so sad. I just, nothing's working. I mean, I try to tell myself I'm going to quit. And then by 1:00 shift, the shift to start at 9, by 1:00 I'd be using again. It was just horrible. I remember, crying out this December 25th, 1989, just crying out, please help, and, in 2 weeks, he sent some angels, but they weren't angels that you think of, and when you think of biblically, they did not have, wings, and they didn't have flowing white, gowns or anything like that. These angels, had blue uniforms on, and they had things on the top of their car, and they put you in handcuffs. Those were the angels that I had. So January 10th, 1990, I went into work, and I drove up and I saw this security car from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which was the headquarters for this company I worked for, and I knew it was over. I knew that basically it was over. And so I went in there and I saw the guy, and he says, "You're in trouble." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." So I went in, and it was just like a big relief off my back, And he says, "Well, tell us everything, and we'll go easy on you." So basically, I did a fist step with the guy with regards to all the things I had taken, and unfortunately, what was kind of tough about all that is I worked at all these different stores throughout my time working for the company, which was about 7 or 8 months, but there were other people that were diverting. So I got blamed for things I didn't even get blamed for. But at the time, I just remember the feeling of relief that finally the secret was over. But I didn't really know how much trouble I was in. So I remember going home after, they let me go home after I admitted to all this particular stuff, and sitting down and writing this big long letter to my parents and family members and girlfriends, just basically writing out what I had been living through since I was 15 for 8 years. And it was such a lonely feeling in a sense. I was just probably 10:30 in the morning, everyone's at work, and I'm sitting in my apartment, So I finally told them all. It was a big shock to them and my girlfriend, and no one kind of knew. The next day, the police officers came and took me to state police. They took me down to the county building, because they arrested me, and I got brought in to be arraigned. And it was kind of a bonus there. The TV cameras were there to catch someone who got caught making a crystal meth lab. But then they got a bonus. They got me being brought in, marched in, Frog marched in also. And I didn't really think that the cameras were live, primarily because I didn't see no red light. But I got brought in and got arraigned. with multiple felonies, for having, possessing prescription meds without, having a prescription. And I got put up in the third floor of the county building, and that night, got to see myself, on the, in the news, kind of 6 o'clock news with 11 other close friends, and they went crazy calling me a star and all that type of stuff. But that was the bottom, going through detox with a 1/2-inch mattress, with no box spring, with a toilet next to you that there's no, a stainless steel toilet. Then I realized the consequences of my use, and just thinking, wow, what is going on? My whole life has changed. So it took about 3 weeks for me to get out of there to go to treatment. I talked to a lady that was for pharmacist helping pharmacist. She says, her name was Marlene. She was great, and she's like, well, you'll never be able to drink again, too. And I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, if I get married or whatever, I can't have a drink. Drinking never ended me up in jail. And I remember just thinking that in my mind, and I didn't really say much to her, So within 3 weeks, I was lucky. I got out. I had to plead to like 2 counts of like multiple felonies to get out of jail and go to treatment. In Grand Rapids, we had a long-term treatment facility for healthcare professionals. So I was really lucky. So I went to 4 months of long-term treatment. I can't say enough about it. Thing was, none of it was covered by insurance, so it cost about 20 grand back in 1990.
Wow, that's a lot of money. That's one of the problems I find with people getting into rehab. It's just so cost prohibitive. I mean, if you don't have that insurance, like me personally, I had something happen. So I had a DUI. Therefore, for some reason, that qualified me with the state of New Jersey for them to pay for my rehab. Without that, I couldn't afford it.
Now, if I would have said it was alcohol primarily, then it would have been paid for. But because it was drugs, it wasn't paid for. But luckily, my parents, my parents weren't rich people. My dad was blue collar, and but they had some money. They lent me the money, to do it. I just remember being so worried about the cost. I remember my first sponsor said to me, and I just shared this on that recovery page. I said, I remember him telling me, he said, what? I had that, and I had restitution and lawyer bills. And he said, what? Bills will get paid. And I remember feeling some relief that they did get paid. It just took some time. And so with that, I remember going to long-term treatment. It was awesome. And I remember sitting there, because I had some alcohol denial when I got there. And obviously, and I remember sitting around all these people, and this is back in the time where they did pay for there was a lot of people in treatment, because Medicaid, I think, paid for a lot. And there was a lot of people there. And I remember a lot of these people were there for like their 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th treatment. And I remember thinking, pardon my French, I'm thinking, I don't want to go through this again, I remember a counselor said, well, you don't have to relapse. You don't have to go through it again. So I remember talking to all these people, and I asked them, tell me about you. What happened, And a lot of these people said, well, my primary drug was in marijuana. My primary drug was crack, and I started drinking again. It took me back to crack. Or people would say, my primary drug was, Xanax or whatever, and then I started drinking again, and I went back to Xanax, or I became an alcoholic, and the light bulb went on. It's not really what your primary drug is, and whatever you're doing that changes your mood. And then the light bulb went on that, what, Marlene is right. I don't want to do anything. My dad's an alcoholic. I don't want to do anything that's going to, wake up that gorilla, being trained to that gorilla that I have. I'm chained to a gorilla, and I don't want to do anything to wake up that gorilla. And then a few years later, I did do, kind of an alcohol, kind of alcohol inventory. And, you know, when I drank, I did a lot of things relationship wise that I wouldn't normally do, that I caused a lot of wreckage with relationships. So yeah, I am an alcoholic. So I call myself a recovering alcoholic addict. But back then, for some reason, because my dad was an alcoholic, I didn't want to say I was an alcoholic at 23. But so I don't want to spend too much time just on the drunk-a-log or the addict, log. But I got out of long-term treatment. I was grateful for that. I got out a month, and I went in front of the judge, and they sentenced me to a year, 5 months, in, and 6 months in a halfway house. So we got on a work release. So I started pushing a lawnmower about 300 yards from the pharmacy that I got busted at. So I got to drive by the pharmacy every day, and mowing lawns and planting trees and digging ditches and all that type of stuff in my hometown. So I had to face all that type of stuff. I used to have people drive by and say, "Hey, how's that education working out for you?" And yelling out stuff at me, and so I had to deal with a lot of that shame and guilt stuff right away, and it wasn't easy. Then I had to spend 5 months in the halfway house, in the tough part of town, and doing that type of stuff, and that was good. That was good humility for me. So I did that. I went in front of the licensing board pharmacy, and because they suspended my license. They originally wanted to revoke my license. But, because I went to long-term treatment, I had some advocates. They said, people do recover. Even in 1990, the physician that was an alcoholic addict said, long-term treatment works, and you shouldn't revoke this guy's license, suspend it and see how he does. And so long and short of it, so I spent 2.5 years pushing a lawnmower. I did a lot of public service. I went to the pharmacy school, told my story. Schools, told my story. Started working with others. Working with other healthcare professionals, working with others, around the program. I got my license back. But it took a while to get a job. There's people in the area, when you're on the front page of the news and front page, people are not so excited to hire us back, right away. Kind of like Norm from Cheers. I can't remember Woody Harrelson did Cheers. You're gonna let the guy and the bartender, start working, around that type of stuff. So basically, how I told the guys, I told my story. I said, you know what, it's kind of cool is with me, with the urine drops, you're gonna know for sure if I'm using it or not. At any time, you can get it. Urine drop. Plus the benefits, when you got someone who's in recovery, you're gonna have someone who's grateful to be working. I use it as a positive. I didn't use it as a negative. And eventually I did get a job. It took some time, and there was some struggles there because times were tough. I was living on credit cards and money was tight, and I had to live on $20 a week, with one slice of that, that ham and whatever you get at Admiral or those gas stations, you have that little processed meat, and the dollar bread, and the little Debbie's, that's what I had for lunch and stuff, But I grew up that way. I grew up with not a lot of money. My wife grew up with not a lot of money, and so I was used to that. I grew up with 7 kids, so I was able to survive. So I got a good job, and then the long and short of it, about 10 years after I started working, so I was able to work in the drugstore around those drugs, with never having a thought of using. And that's through this program, I prayed about it, never had a thought of using. Now, with that said, playing music in the bars, I still play music. I started playing music. I'm a musician today. I've had some thoughts of not very often, but I've had some thoughts of drinking more than I've had thoughts of using. But I'll talk about that, and we'll probably go a little bit long, and I apologize.
No, this is what we do.
Okay, well, I sometimes go a little bit long, but anyway, so about 10 years in of doing what I was doing, working in the drugstore, I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more, and I said I want to go back and get my doctorate in pharmacy because I wanted to work more than just community pharmacy. And so I applied at the University of Washington out in Seattle. And I got the application. The first application says, "Have you ever been committed for a felony? Have you ever committed a felony?" So I threw it away. And I'm like, the shame piece kicked in. I'm like, and I talked to other folks in the program. And I said, you know what? I've had to deal with that with, filling out certain licenses and stuff. And you know what? I've do the same thing that you did with your, when you got your job, use it as a badge, So I did that. I got myself another application. I filled it out, and I put that. I used that as a badge of honor. At that time I had, let's see, 10 years of recovery. And I use it as a positive. And come to find out, I got accepted. And what the felony piece was about basically, more of like sex offenders and stuff, being around people, that were other patients and stuff, because you're working with patients. But there was a lot of fear there. There was a lot of fear of being rejected because of this disease, and there was fear of, was I going to be able academically be able to do it, and then going all the way across the country, I was a little bit afraid. But it was about being uncomfortable, So I was accepted the program, went out to Seattle. It was really awesome, took me 3 years to complete that program, got my doctorate. Started working in a physician's office, taking care of patients. Decided I want to do more work with research and development. I got, in 2004, I got an offer for this really cool company to work where I really wanted to, and then they made me an offer, and they said, you know what, we're going to do a background check. I mean, for you to get accepted, we got to do a background check, and I'm like, holy shit, here we go again, So as soon as I accept the offer, I fire it off. Because see, with these type of jobs, you don't fill out an application that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? These type of jobs, they interview you, and then once they make you an offer, which is significant, then they do a background check on you to make sure it goes through. So filled out the same thing, They said, well, let's see what the background check says, and then we'll go from there if we're going to give you the job or not, And so for 2 weeks, I had to wait for the background check to come through, and talk about turning stuff over. I remember that 2 weeks was so tough, because this was a job I really, really wanted. I really, really, really wanted. And I just remember just being really afraid that God was not going to give me what I wanted. It was really hard. It was really hard. I remember walking. This was a job I really, really wanted. And supposedly it took a little bit longer than they said, because they actually had to send someone to Muskegon County to actually get some of it, because it had been so long. They actually had to look up some of the stuff. And so the background check cleared, and the company appreciated the honesty. They didn't have any problem with hiring a convicted drug felon, because they love the honesty. It's about the honesty and long-term recovery. They hired me on what I could do for them rather than what happened in 1990. Now, since then, I had to go through probably 2 or 3 of those since, because I've taken other jobs, and it's been great from that aspect. Personally, otherwise, I made mention, I met my wife. I was 2 years sober. I lost that girlfriend. Remember, I mentioned about having a relationship. When I was in jail, it's hard to go back. When I was in jail, I remember being on the phone, and she was like, this is a girl I dated for 4 years, and just a wonderful woman, girl at the time. She was 19, I was 23. And she's like, well, you haven't been honest with me, about you're using drugs. Is there anything else you haven't been honest with me about, And I was such into the 5th step mode, even though I wasn't working a program at the time. That whole saying of, the truth will set you free. I told her about some things about being with other women at the time, and the truth was, she set me free after that, so, so going through treatment, going through jail, I mean, I was, single, and it was very painful to lose that relationship, but, that's the way it was. Luckily, after I got out of the halfway house, I was sober about a year, and I met my wife. This woman actually was friends with my girlfriend at the time. I had known her before and at church, and then we started dating. And she didn't really drink around me that much, but a couple times she was, and I joked about, maybe she needs AA, and a couple times, she had drank and had blackouts and stuff, and she knew I was going to meetings and liked what I was, and so she started going to meetings, a couple of years after I was going to meetings, and she's been in the program ever since. So we've been married coming up on 26 years in November. We've got 3 children.
Long time.
Yeah, 19, 16, and 15. We both have told them all abbreviated, basically first step stories of all of our, what's going on. We tell them about the disease of alcohol and the genetics behind all that. I'm grateful to be able to tell them some of that stuff, even the jail stuff and the felony stuff. And it's a little shocking for kids at first, but I'd rather have them hear it from us. Still work a program today. Still go to meetings today. Still tell my story whenever possible. That's why when you put that invitation out, I try to do that because, I tell you what, it was awfully dark sitting in that jail cell because I didn't think I'd ever be able to work again, practice again, all that educational stuff. Because at the time, money and all those things are really important, and it's all, I mean, not that those things aren't important because you need stuff that's survive, but, those are such a small part of what AA and this 12 steps have given me ever since, so I try to pay back whatever I can. And so life is really good today. And I owe it all to God, these 12 steps to fellowship, and the people that has given it to me. So that's the gist of it. I don't know, any other questions, thoughts you have in regards to that, or?
No, you were a great storyteller. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. My last question, which I ask everybody before we go, is, do you have any advice for people watching or listening?
So the advice I'd have, if you're early in the recovery, is, get connected with your local group along with Zoom. Try to find out who your local group is. A couple sayings that get people fired up. Meeting makers make it. And the sense being is that you need to do more than meetings, but try to get connected with people as much as possible, because loneliness will kill us. Loneliness will kill me. Second thing is stick with the winners. Find out who's got some recovery. And what if they have what you like, find out what they did. Get a sponsor. I know it's really scary. I remember asking my first sponsor, it's scary to do, but give us someone you can get with and talk about stuff and throw stuff out, and then, get in the books and work the steps, my first year, I worked on the 3-step waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Waltz, And then after that, I remember getting out and doing a 4-step, and then following up. I mean, I had the big book and the 12 and 12. And I was sitting at the beach over here and just writing it down. And then within a week later, I did the 5th step, And then with that, I had a nice layer of things that I could see all my 6 character defects. And then I was able to work on them there. Then I did the 7th step, and then obviously breaking it all down, I had a nice list of people I needed to already have that could go into the next step. So you had one question that kind of extrapolated with a bunch of things on there, but just stay connected and this too, these things will happen. They do take some time, just be involved. Be like yourself right here, do little things. If someone asks you to do something, someone asks you to speak, or say yes first. And then if some reason you can't do it, just go back and say, well, by the way, I said yes, but it doesn't work out in my schedule right now. Can I do it later? If someone asks you to speak, just say yes. And then if it doesn't happen, if you can't do it, then say, well, by the way, I can't do it. Can we do it the next week? I just always say yes when it comes to the program, and then work out the details later.
Good advice. Good advice. I like that. That's one of the things they say in life also, kind of just say yes. Figure out the rest later, but when you have something new that could be new and exciting, just say yes. I've heard that before. So did you have anything else you want to add?
Boy, I think I've said enough. I've only taken like 3 breaths, I think, in this whole interview process. One thing I want to say is I appreciate you doing this type of stuff. This is kind of cool stuff that I don't know how many people thank you for your time and your effort, and doing service work. This is a sense of service work, and takes a lot of work to set all this up, and getting people together and returning messages and all this type of stuff. So no one has told you lately, you are carrying a message, and it is appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That means a lot to me. It really does.
Great.
I'll try my hardest.
So where can people find this stuff? I don't know. Where can I find other stuff?
So as far as I was just about to give our sales pitch. So for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, you can go below and give us a like, also subscribe. And to answer Ron's question, you can find us at www.addicts-anonymous.com. We have plenty of resources on the webpage, as well as our approved literature tab, where we have a ton of free articles. You can also find us on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram. We have a Facebook group. Also, we are on TikTok. So there's a bunch of platforms you can find us. That's all we have for today. I hope you like what you saw and heard. And until next time.